Hey guys, today we're going to talk about how to choose the most efficient power supply for your build. Now, before we start the video, I need to tell you that uh, this is for the people that want to get very picky with their power consumption and they want to find the absolute best efficiency point. Now, for most of you, uh, maybe it's not worth your time. So in that case, uh, you'll find just looking at the reviews and seeing, okay, this PSU is efficient under most conditions, so I want to buy that. Okay, but here I explain you uh, everything or most of the things you need to know about PSU efficiency. So the number one is that we're not going to use the 80 plus certifications because they tend to be very inaccurate. Okay, I'll make a video about that. Stay tuned for it. But as you can see here, the Seasonic X750, that's an 80 plus rated power supply. Yet, under some conditions, it may be more efficient than something like a Corsair AX760, which is an 80 plus platinum power supply. Okay, um, so if you want to know uh, which PSU is more efficient under a given load, you need to look at websites like Tom's Hardware, Tech Power Up, this Tech Power Up, because these guys test those PSUs under a lot of conditions, like from 20 to 100% load, from 40 to 100 watts, and they also test bumper power, 5-volt standby power consumption, etc. So you get a better idea of uh, what you should buy if you're aiming at higher efficiency. So another of the misconceptions that you hear very commonly about PSUs is that PSUs are more efficient at 50% load. So if you have a system that draws, I don't know, 300 watts, you should uh, purchase a 600 watt PSU because uh, that's how you hit peak efficiency. And I'm gonna tell you why that is wrong. So we look at the graph right here. I think we can make it a bit bigger. Okay, that's fine. So this PSU, same Seasonic X750, we can clearly see that it hits peak efficiency at 300 watts. If we do the math, we'll see that that equals to maybe 40% load. So yeah, most efficient at 40% load, because 100% load means 100% of uh, the nominal power rating. So if a PSU is 50 watts, 100% load means the PSU pulling 750 watts on the output, or in other words, a PSU providing 750 watts to your components. So this one is 40%. This hits peak efficiency 40% load. Some PSUs might hit at peak efficiency at 20% load. Some of them might do it at 60% load. So don't trust that. With that out of the way, we can move on to how do we actually choose the most efficient PSU for your build. So what you need to figure out is uh, what are the applications, or what do you do most of the time, like what's your typical load and your typical idle scenario. Then you need to calculate the average power consumption on both uh, under load and at idle, and then based on uh, what are the averages, how many hours your PC spends at idle, how many hours your PC spends under load, uh, you'll know uh, whether or not you want to be more efficient at idle or under load. So uh, not only does this take time, that's why I don't recommend doing this. If you don't care about efficiency, this is mostly for people that are running their computer like 24/7 and they pay a lot for the electricity bill. In that case, they should be concerned about it. But otherwise, again, this might not be worth it. Okay, back to business. So for that, you need this something like a wall meter, okay, like a kilowatt. But you could also use things like multimeter, uh, current clamp, etc. But you also need to how to use them, and you might not have those things available. Okay, whatever the case may be, remember if you use a like a wall meter, that thing also takes into account the efficiency losses of the PSU. So it's not that accurate anyway. It's very common, pretty straightforward to use. Many people like them. The thing is, you fire up a game or execute a demand log, and you find out that your average power consumption is like 400 watts. In that case, remember, uh, you need to subtract uh, the efficiency losses by the PSU. Like depending on what PSU you have, thankfully you have these things to help you figure out how much you have to subtract. It might be like 10%, 50%. So, for example, we know that we're using. We're gonna take this as an example again. It's pretty simple. 750 watts. So your power consumption is 400 watts. So you assume that without those efficiency losses, you're looking at uh, something in the 50% range of the PSU. So this PSU will be about 93% efficient. So 400 watts uh, times 93%. Oh, did it wrong. 400 times 0.93, and that's 372. And you're gonna do pretty much the same with your uh, idle load. 372 watts. So you need to look for a PSU that is most efficient under 372 watts. Okay. Now, if you don't have a wall meter and you don't have something like a multimeter current clamp, hopefully you'll find websites like Tom's Hardware, Tech Power Up. They also test power consumption of the components. There are other websites also, and if they use a similar configuration to you, it might make sense to go with them as well. But the nice thing about Tom's Hardware and Tech Power Up is number one, they don't use the power a wall meter, so uh, you don't run into these weird calculations that might be inaccurate anyways. And also, like they test uh, the GPU only or the CPU only, and they use better equipment to do so. So it's very nice. Now, uh, when you get into a review of a certain graphics card, uh, try it to be the same as the one you're using. Like remember, depending on the model, like if it's a Gigabyte Aorus or a Gaming G1, there might be it's like difference. But also, make sure you're looking at the right power graph. So in Tech Power Up, we'll find like stress test, gaming, idle, multi-monitor, Blu-ray, etc. So for load scenarios, we want the average or the sustained graph, in which they measure what's the average sustained, not peak, sustained. So what's the power consumption under gaming or under a demanding task most of the time. So for example, if we have a 2080 Ti, we see that its power consumption sustained is about 273. Okay. Now, if we look at the CPU, so this is gaming. Remember, depending on what you're doing, these numbers might vary a lot. So in case of gaming, this isn't uh, taking the CPU to its limits. You're not really utilizing all those 8 cores and 16 threads. So in this case, the power consumption is rather low, about 70 to 73 watts. Now, what happens if you're running Blender? This thing could draw like 200 watts. So make sure you're looking at uh, something that's the most compatible possible. Now, we add up the numbers, so about 70 watts with 270. That's 340. And now GPU and CPU are the components that draw the most power, but you also need to take into account monitor, etc. But that's not a whole lot. I would add like 50 watts because you're not really stressing those components most of the time, even if you're doing like something demanding. So we end up with about 370, maybe 390. And so in this case, we find out that our system draws like 390. So we need the PSU to be most efficient under 390